Hey guys, so here we are, finally, my top 5 albums of 2017. Um, this, some really good albums from some bands that have been known to many to be favorites of mine, and a couple of bands that haven't really been on my list before, so let's just get right to it. So, number 5 is Styx, The Mission. Um, yeah, this is a bit of a weird album because, Styx, their last couple records that have come out have been not that great. It's kind of the same story for a lot of, classic rock bands that try to sort of make it in a more modern world. A lot of the times, classic rock bands that release new albums kind of come off a little lazy, half assed, um, almost like they're kind of nostalgia tripping. But Styx's The Mission actually manages to be really cool, really relevant, almost cutting edge. And what I really enjoyed about this record is that it's a very progressive record. It's a concept album about a mission to Mars and the various emotions in the crew and the events of that mission, and how they relate to each character. There's some really, really excellent instrumental work on this record, some absolutely brilliant melodies, and I'm just impressed. I can't believe that a band that many have written off as just, a nostalgia act that isn't relevant, that isn't doing anything new or good recently, has managed to pull off making a brand new album that's just amazing. It's an incredible record. Go check it out. Number 4 comes from a brand new band, and this one was actually a little bit later on in the year, so it's kind of surprising how high this is up on my list, but Sons of Apollo with Psychotic Symphony. This is, of course, the new collaboration between Mike Portnoy and Derek Sherinian, who are known as being bandmates in Dream Theater around the Falling into Infinity, A Change of Seasons era. And what's really cool about this is this sounds nothing like Falling into Infinity. There are a couple of maybe somewhat lame, sort of mainstream metal tracks on this record, but there are a few long form prog metal epics, and just listening to it, dare I say, this album is better than anything Dream Theater's released in Systematic Chaos. It's the best thing Mike Portnoy's been involved with since Transatlantic. Um, I have to say, this is probably a shoe-in for the best sort of modern Dream Theater style prog metal album that's come out in a good long while. And the players on it are really strong. You've got Ron Thal, Bumblefoot, Thal, whatever. You have Billy Sheehan on bass. You've got Jeff Scott Soto on vocals. These guys are just at the top level of their game, and I hope these guys come out with another album, maybe even tour Canada. Number 3, Ayreon, The Source. Again, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a massive Ayreon fan. I have been since the release of The Human Equation. The Source is just another brilliant album. Some really good performances from some really great singers. Some new faces like Tommy from Between the Buried and Me. Magnus from Circus Maximus is on it. Michael Mills from Toehider makes his second appearance, along with Tommy from Camelot and Seventh Wonder, and Simone Simmons from Epica. Just a great lineup of singers, really epic songs. The Day That the World Breaks Down moved me to tears when I first heard it. Probably the best single I've heard this year. And there are other tracks on this record that are just really great. Star of Syrah, Run Apocalypse Run, Planet Y is Alive. It's just some really, really excellent songs. And, it's just a classic Ayreon album. Go check it out. Number 2, this one's kind of an album that I almost wrote off when I first heard it. I almost didn't really care for it the first listen, but the more I heard it, the more it kind of grew on me. And that is the Contortionists' Clairvoyant. These guys have made a sort of a transition from, this very technical, progressive sort of melodic deathcore to something a little bit more akin to ambient progressive metal, not quite djent, but with a little bit of that djent sort of influence in it. And I find that Clairvoyant has been sort of the logical conclusion of that. Now the band has basically stripped away all of the deathcore elements, leaving just very jazz fusion oriented guitar playing, very post-rock kind of atmospheres, and Michael Lessard's very morose, clean vocals. The songwriting on this record is really sort of the icing on the cake. This is where this album shines in conveying a sort of a concept over, a grander album cycle, and these guys have just absolutely nailed it. The title track has probably the riff of the year for me. I just love that really Pat Metheny sort of jazz fusion style. Really works for me, really gets me right here. So now we get to the number one album of 2017, Pain of Salvation's In the Passing Light of Day. Probably my favorite band in existence, and I had the pleasure of seeing them live early this year, just after the release of this record, and In the Passing Light of Day is a complete return to form for the band. They had kind of gone in a little bit more of a blues rock, 70s prog direction on Linoleum and Road Salt, and their last album before that, Scarsick, was very similar in that it went completely sort of left of center for the band into more like nu metal, sort of drop-tuned heavy territory, which was a little bit different for the band. And it seems to me like In the Passing Light of Day is kind of a grand overarching statement for Pain of Salvation. An album that sort of encompasses all of the different eras of the band's sound. There's some of that very technical, progressive sort of sound on tracks like On a Tuesday, Full Throttle Tribe. There's these sort of heavier, more visceral, aggressive songs like Reasons, Tongue of God. The band even throws in a couple of very Road Salt-ish sort of 70s bluesy ballad kind of tracks like The Taming of a Beast, Silent Gold, and the epic title track is just beautiful. It's all around just a great record. Probably one of the few albums that I've listened to this year that every time I listen to it, I'm blown away by it. And a little bit of a personal sort of triumph for me about this record is that I spent much of the first couple months of the year transcribing the songs from this record. So there are videos of me playing all of the songs from the record except for Angels of Broken Things, which I'm still figuring out the solo from. But, this is one of those albums where not only did it really impress me just from a sonic point of view, but it actually inspired me to pick up my instrument and learn something. And, figure out an album by ear, something I haven't done in a long time. So for an album to do that to me, I have to give it the top spot. It's a great record. The storytelling is really excellent. It's a very emotional concept record about Daniel Gildenlow's stay in a hospital after contracting flesh-eating bacteria. And, you really feel what he's going through in this record. It's almost kind of like, I take it as a concept album about, like, the 5 stages of loss, the acceptance, denial, grief, bargaining, all that. And it's just an expertly done concept record. probably the best record Pain of Salvation's done since Remedy Lane. So, yeah, that's my top 10 list for 2017. And, you know, each of the albums in this video, I highly recommend. If you are a prog rock fan, check these out. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope that next year's records are even better.